Hello and welcome to our Nutanix Town Hall. My name is Michelle Taylor-Smith and I'm the Senior Director of Channel Marketing here at Nutanix, and I'd like to welcome you today to our event. We know your time is very valuable, so we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I'd like to introduce our guests. We have Dheeraj Pandey, who is our founder, CEO, and chairman, so welcome, Dheeraj.
Thank you.
And we also have Julie O'Brien, who is our VP of Corporate Marketing. And Julie's actually sitting in for Howard Ting. Unfortunately, Howard was unable to make it, but thank you very much for joining us, Julie.
You're welcome. I'll do my best Howard impersonation.
Do it great. We're happy to have you here. So a couple of quick things before we start. As you know, when you registered, you had the opportunity to provide questions, so we'll be talking through the questions that we received. We actually received over 800 questions and comments, so thank you very much for taking the time to do that, and we really appreciate hearing from you. If you have not had a chance to provide a question, you can do so still during the event, and we are going to do our best to get through as many of them as possible. If we can't answer them during the event, then we'll reach out afterwards. And this is being recorded, so if you have missed something or you want to share it with coworkers, please feel free to do so. So that being said, I'm going to jump into questions because obviously we have a lot of questions to start with. So in those 800 questions, we had multiple, it was easy to kind of bucket them a little bit. And so the first bucket that we put them into was really with company. And the number one question around company is IPO. And so I think this one actually summed it up the best, is what conditions in the market from a macro view will you need to proceed with the IPO, and when do you anticipate that happening?
Yeah, great question, by the way. But by the way, thanks everyone for being here. And obviously, as you mentioned about people thinking about what IPO means, it's probably one of the big marketing events for this company. It's a launch of a new product called NTNX, which is the stock symbol, and we're going and selling this new product in the marketplace. And I think there's you're obviously negotiating all the time with the marketplace. There's buyer's market and seller's market and buyer's market and seller's market. So it goes up and down all the time. And till about, I would say October or so, it was a seller's market because you're selling a product and somebody was buying it, which is this stock ticker itself. In the last 6-8 weeks, it's been a little bit of a buyer's market. And I think it's just the way negotiations happen in the marketplace. We think that we have a pretty good product. In terms of...
We think so.
Yeah, and I don't just mean the technology product, or it's also the company, the stock ticker, and so on. So we're just waiting for this market to actually become a little bit more pro-growth because, they were running for the hills, looking at buying gold and Microsoft and GE and IBM. So they had a different taste for the last 8 weeks. And the best part about Wall Street is that it's highly elastic. The faster it goes down, the faster it comes back up again. Now, macro is more about Main Street. I always have this dichotomy in my head about Wall Street and Main Street, and these are two different things. People tend to confuse the two. And when both of them stink is when 2008 happens. It's like a generational depression, kind of stuff, And we all know that even when we had a generational depression, as in 2008-9, it took about 6-8 months for the market to recover as well. This one, we definitely think that Main Street is still healthy, given what we look at our business and so on. Things are going well. And consumers still spending. So there's no macro weakness that we see yet. And hopefully, Wall Street will recover in the next few weeks to a couple of months, and we'll actually then be able to go and sell the product in a marketplace that people go and respect growth for, because that's what we're really, aiming to do for the next 3-5 years. There's so much of land grab here that we could actually go and make it look like it's not about growth as much, or you can go and say, look, competition and incumbents have to be won over. People look at this as there's something wrong with the business. Very soon we'll actually see an update to the S1 itself. So I recommend all our channel partners go and look at our S1 too in the coming days to see how the business is really doing. So there's no room for speculation as such. I don't know if Julie want to add
I think that's perfect. You said that there's no kind of exact window or time for a company to present itself as a public offering. Like there's always that window when it is a great company and when the product is sound and the whole company is sound behind it. So.
And because we are not desperate for money, we are not really, entering a twister, which is what it was in the last 6 weeks. Knowingly, we would not enter a twister or Oklahoma-style hurricane or a tornado or something. If we didn't have the choice, then we probably would have been forced to go public right now. But because we've actually done well with respect to cash and so on, we think we'd rather wait it out and wait for a saner market where it makes it more amenable to a company that actually has done as well as we have.
It's more of a want to than a have to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting because when we talk internally, there's a lot of questions and comments about our culture. And I thought it was interesting that some of the questions came through externally. How do you think the IPO will change Nutanix?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very loaded question. There's no easy answers. And just like life, whether people's character changes over time or not is about the strength of character. Like, I was a very jovial kid when I was a kid, and I was very naughty as well, And over time, at least, even till today, a lot of people actually find it heartening to see me laugh. I mean, I laugh out loud. And so a lot of things have not changed about me. When I was 6, I was used to laugh like this. When I'm 40, I laugh like this. And it's true for companies too, actually. They have a certain DNA, and depends on the strength of character. I was stubborn when I was 6. And I'm stubborn even now about how we need to go and take incumbents head on and so on. So about companies, that's also true that, there is a certain thing about what you believe in, whether it's about innovation, about taking the big companies head on. Those things hopefully wouldn't change, or they would. I mean, we've been tested to about 1,600 plus employees in the company. We're not a perfect company, but we've been able to take it through. I used to talk about culture or have concerns about culture in 100 people. Like, how do we do this when you're 200 people and 400 people?
I joined at 150, and I remember the car like, we're 150. How are we gonna maintain this culture?
But it's great that we're so focused on that.
Yeah.
I think that's very telling in terms of how the company will also evolve.
And I think for as long as we continue to innovate, not just the product side, but even reach out and communication wise. Like today, our reach out with the channel is on Slack. And that's scaling us really well. I mean, I'm in touch with a lot of partner SEs and reps on Slack now. We have a very prolific NTC channel where we're able to actually look at our issues. Because what happens when you grow is that the attention to detail shrinks. You're just flying high up here based on numbers, when all you need to worry about was individual concerns of employees and customers and product issues and so on. And having a pulse on the ground, having a pulse of people, having a pulse of the details is what is required to stay honest, humble, and hungry, which are the 3 things that we actually really vie for, So keeping our ears to the ground and knowing the pulse of the marketplace, for anything, packaging, pricing, friction, technology issues, product issues, lack of innovation, people not being happy about things, all that stuff is about keeping our ears to the ground. And I think we're finding new ways with technology tools and things like that to continue to keep the company as small as it could ever be, despite the fact that you're much bigger. So defying the laws of physics and gravity is probably the thing that we have to continue to do. And I think we've done that till now. And I believe that with the kind of team that we've come to have, hopefully you've seen the same ever since you joined.
Yeah, and I think also too, just keeping in mind that the IPO is one step in the journey. And I really do feel that that's very much true to the spirit of how people inside of Nutanix are thinking about it, that we have so much more to do in terms of really building this iconic company. And we have big aspirations. We're through Act 1, we're on our way to Act 2, and there's a lot for us to do.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look back at, let's say, your last company or the company before that, Box, it was a high flyer, and they got ahead of themselves. I think we have to make sure that we stay grounded, because there's a lot of things that we aspire to do, but we can't outmarket ourselves. I think we have to figure out what it means to, the recent Wall Street Journal ad that talks about AWS and VMware and Nutanix, and we'll get deeper into it. But knowing what it means to know the attention to detail, and understanding what is that gap between VMware and AWS is probably one of the most important things that we actually lose sleep on today. And that's about culture, Attention to detail and ambition are two things that actually define culture of any company.
It was interesting having done 3 of these now, or this is our 3rd one, and seeing the difference in questions that are coming through. Before, I would say there was always about, in terms of company, there was about 50-50 were questions about IPO versus are you going to be bought by another company. There were very, very few questions, are you going to be bought by Cisco or Dell or some of the other things? But there were a couple, and it wasn't so much about the partners themselves. They actually, both or a few of the comments were in terms of the customers. How customers have to feel that we're going to be around for a while. So how do you address that?
Again, going back to looking at the meta observations. How has the company innovated? How has the company thought about the end users? How has the company invested in R&D and in sales and marketing, and the small little things that matter, like Sizer, Capacity Planner, Slack, things like that. What are the various things that we've actually done? Our let's say our BV structure in Amsterdam, which is our international headquarters, things like that. We did this like 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. All that was done not to eventually get sold. I mean, all these things that we invest in, they cost a lot of money. They're not cheap, actually, in any way. And any company that is trying to optimize for the short term would not be doing those things. They probably would just go and get some logos along the way with no repeat business from those customers, and then try to just market all this stuff to a suitor and eventually get acquired. We are respectful of, let's say, VMware, but we also go and compete hard with them. You would not do this. I mean, today, how many of the hyper-converged players can actually go and say, we have an alternative to VMware? 0, except for us, right? I mean, FlexPod, vBlock, VxRail, VxRack, whatever you can think of, everything out there, anything that's out there, actually will say, you still need VMware. And we are the only player that's saying, you know what, you probably can do without VMware. And that would not happen without ambition. And that would not happen without the respect for VMware as well, because you need to really have that attention to detail about what did people love VMware for? And what do they not like it for that they love Amazon for? And you bring all that back into another company like Nutanix. Now we're talking. So I think all I can say is that there's no such thing as, or you'll never get acquired, but all you can see is what are you optimizing for, short term or long term?
Right.
And if you're optimizing for the long term, then a lot of good things can happen for the company itself.
I think we see that too in the recent NPS scores and the Omega awards that we've received. So proud of from a customer satisfaction standpoint in terms of optimizing for the long run. 3 years in a row, that really shows the investment that we're making to really take care of our customers.
I mean, think about it. Support costs money. Again, the startups who are actually quick to get acquired, they would never invest in support. Because they don't care about repeat business. They don't care about that, end user delight in some sense. So a lot of things that we're doing are investments, and they actually will only show results in the long term when we have large global 500, global 2000 customers, repeat customers. When the SMB segment of the market and the mid-market, lower end of the mid-market, it feels like it's not disenfranchised. Because many a time when you grow into a company that's become, all about the global 2000, you miss the attention to detail about support and things like that. And we are thinking about a lot of those things. I mean, I stay awake for those things, that how do we not become a company with that kind of a support organization which has zero empathy for the SMB segment of the market or something. How can technology help? How can we scale? And these things you don't do if all you're thinking about is getting acquired by someone else.
Last question in this section, are you hiring?
Absolutely. As you can see, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to pull up the Nutanix jobs website, but there's a ton of hiring going on. And then we're hiring all around the world as well. The great thing is that we've actually worked with our partners, and we co-create jobs. It's not just working for us, but working with us. That's equally important. Like, there are partners who are opening up dedicated positions within their payroll that will only sell Nutanix. And that's unique.
And we see that on the OEM side too with Lenovo as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's some big partners who do like $1 billion, $2 billion in business, and they're saying we'll hire 30, 40 heads, people who will actually go and sell Nutanix and Nutanix only. So that's another way of actually working with Nutanix. And I think between these two, we can actually create a lot of jobs.
Yeah, that's great. All right, we'll move on to the next section, which is vision and market. And there were a lot of questions about cloud and hyper-converged and that. And so can you just give a quick state of the union on what you see changing in terms of market and customer needs?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to anything that's transformational, whether it was VMware 10 years ago or Microsoft 20 years ago, NetApp 15 years ago, Amazon right now, they all had to start somewhere. Like, VMware started in test and dev. They said, we'll do a pretty good job of test and dev, and then because of our ambition, we'll actually go and push the envelope on virtualization to the point where it is now in a lot of organizations, it's 80% virtualized. And now in the public cloud, a hypervisor is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. Nobody buys an entitlement to Zen or gets a certification in Zen because it's hidden. You don't pay for Zen, and you don't have to be an expert in Zen. So I think hyperconvergence, even though 2 years ago it was an end in itself, or even a year ago it was an end in itself, now it's a means to an end. And going forward, it has to be like that. It's not a destination unto itself. You actually want to make storage invisible, and a lot of companies actually are thinking like that. Yesterday Cisco announced, or whatever, in the next week Cisco will announce something. Lenovo, IBM, EMC, VMware, everybody's now talking, Dell, everybody's talking about how to get rid of the 3-tier architecture. And I think it's the beginning of that momentum, the end of the SAN, as people call it, that will just get better and better and better every year, where it's not about boxes anymore, right? It's about a new consumption model. It's like, Amazon is going and talking about a new consumption model for computing. VMware talked about consuming servers with 2 clicks. So when you change consumption models, it makes a lot of things disruptive, So making storage invisible was a part of it, but absolutely we know that there's a lot more complexity in the data center, which is around the compute layer itself, hypervisors, operations management software, systems management software, tons of people in the data center that need to actually elevate themselves and let software and machines do more with machine learning, artificial intelligence, truly invisible operations, where you're not using a lot of people. Like, simple things like rolling upgrades and adding machines and migrating storage and all that stuff should be imminently automated, And then the final complexity, which is all arising as people try to go towards public cloud, is, you can't have silos, a private cloud and a public cloud. It has to be one. So I think the company's vision is, obviously, 5 years ago we said something that was bold and audacious, and people laughed at us, A lot of the storage players, the next generation storage players, they said, this is a science project, because, there's 2 different buying centers, 2 different teams. Just because it's been done in a Hadoop world or a Google world or a Facebook world doesn't mean it'll get done in the enterprise. So we were a laughing stock 5 years ago. And now with every large vendor saying this is the architecture of the future, I don't know if you feel.
Yeah, and I was going to say what's exciting about that is having that credibility now over the past 6 years of this vision around hyperconvergence and where we want to take it next. As we were testing feedback on the ad that we just recently came out with that we'll share shortly, it was great to hear both from people who weren't necessarily Nutanix customers as well as those who were, in terms of if you can really be that bridge between what I need from my legacy investments in VMware and what I think I want from AWS, like that's just a huge home run. It takes out a lot of complexity, a lot of pain. To your point, some of these guys had actually already tried to move workloads to AWS, and we're just not experiencing the ease of one-click management. It's a whole new set of management tools for them. We're surprised at how not easy it was to move workloads back and forth, and really trying to understand which workloads were appropriate for AWS. So there's definitely a hunger right now in our customer base, and even those who are still on the sidelines trying to figure out when they're ready to jump in, and what we can do to solve that problem for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, just like VMware 10 years ago, 12 years ago, as I said, was a new consumption model. This idea of consuming computing like an e-commerce item, like the way we used to buy mouthwashes and toothpastes and books, is mind-boggling. You know, you swiping a credit card to buy computing, and at the same time, when you look under the covers, Amazon has a lot of weaknesses. You know, like for example, EBS, Elastic Block Storage, will not run most of your apps today. So in some sense, we need to learn a lot about the public cloud around consumption models, credit card, e-commerce, self-service, you know, getting people out of the way, because that's what developers want. Like, no more people in my way. I want to go and consume things the way I want. And at the same time, the IT operators, the folks who carry the pager, you know, because in production, when you're running something and you have SLAs around availability, performance, reliability, you know, how do you get an SAP to work in that environment, and Oracle and Exchange and all that stuff to really work in that environment, is the big challenge that you need to actually go and balance towards. So I think Amazon has a lot to learn in the next 3-5 years. We have a lot to learn in the next 3-5 years. I think customers will actually need both sides of the equation, actually.
And that's actually, there was quite a few questions around that. The pendulum is swinging, right, in terms of this, and a lot of people think, oh, everything's going to go to the cloud. Do you think everything's going to go to the cloud? And
yeah, I mean, look, the mob is the mob. At the end of the day, 15 years ago, everything was going to India because outsourcing was the only way you could save yourself. And then we realized that we had swung the pendulum too much to this other side, and quality mattered and SLAs mattered. So people said onshore a lot of stuff. Like GM had totally outsourced itself to EDS. And then they brought everything back 2-3 years ago because quality sucked big time. So Amazon is the new sort of reflection of outsourcing in some sense. That my teams are not good enough, my infrastructure is not good enough. Can I just outsource this? And then before long you realize, you know, you can't just have it one way or the other. It has to be both.
yeah.
You know? And computing is going through the same kind of consumption spectrum that housing has gone through in the last 50 years, or, you know, automobiles have gone through in the last 30 years. I mean, we used to only own houses, and then we rented and leased, and now we're doing Airbnb. And there's vacation rentals and all that stuff in the middle. You know, cars, we used to own cars, and we started to lease cars, and now we do like Zip cars and Uber and all this stuff, and all with a click of a button. So I think that's what computing is really going through.
Great. We'll move into marketing. We've actually shown it a couple of times, and you've brought up the ad that we recently did. What is Nutanix marketing doing to provide air cover? There's a lot of programs and stuff that we push out through channel. Our salespeople are feet on the street every day singing the praises, but what are we doing as a corporation from an air cover perspective?
Yeah, so I think if we've shared, this is great. We've gotten so much amazing feedback, so hopefully everyone in the channel organization is really enjoying what they're seeing here too. You needed VMware, you want Amazon Web Services, you'll love Nutanix, and then the landing page is nutanix.com/lev. So this really tells our story, and I think for all of the partners, I would encourage everybody to check it out, make sure you understand what this message is all about, because to Dheeraj's point, The market again is shifting, and what customers need is that bridge between these two challenges that they face today, and it's much bigger than just hyperconvergence, much bigger than just storage or compute. And so what you'll be seeing a lot from the marketing team is how do we help deliver that message? How do we help create the air cover for the channel partners so it's much easier to go in and start having the conversation about the problem that the customer is having rather than having to step back and explain who Nutanix is, right?
By the way, this is not easy. I mean, this thing is laughable one more time. And it's like, really, you guys, I mean, yesterday or 2 days ago on Twitter, I saw one of our naysayers, who a lot of us follow as well. There's a ton of naysayers of Nutanix. And one guy's like, I saw this ad and I almost threw up in my mouth.
No.
That's pleasant.
Right?
Thank you for tweeting that. That's pleasant.
But it gives us conviction.
Yeah.
It gives us conviction. Our president, Sudhish, he actually responded back by saying, you need a gripe water for that or something like that. But, it keeps us honest.
Yeah.
Because 5-6 years ago, people used to throw up in their mouth for saying you can converge compute and storage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? For a company to actually go and say you can take this concept of distributed systems and of consumer grade design and bring it to the masses, where the masses is selling Cassandra and Zookeeper and all the stuff that you see on NutanixBible.com. It's not easy to be sold and shrunk wrapped in an appliance and so on. I think it's time for people to laugh at us one more time. Because the more they laugh at us and the more they think we are a science project one more time, the better it makes the company actually. And this ad is as much aspirational as it is a reality actually, right? Because we are now saying this is the vision for the company for the next 5 years. We completely understand VMware. We truly understand VMware. And VMware has kept us honest too. I mean, 6-8 months ago, there was this thing on storagereview.com that says, oh, we actually, on a certain benchmark, we don't do as well. And, like most humans, we are also, as a company, we are a human, so we're not without our follies. We actually said, we don't want you to actually publish this because we haven't done our job on this. But we went and did our job in the next 4 or 5 months on that one particular benchmark, and in 4.6, which is the most recent release, we are beating VMware big time on performance itself. Now, all that this means is that we don't take our competitors lightly, and we don't take incumbents lightly. People like, oh, you're a small little company, you'll get acquired, this, that, whatever. I think what we go and gain inspiration from some of these companies like VMware and Amazon is, what can we do? And when you look at them and you learn from them, how does it keep us honest as well? So this ad is as much aspirational as it is what we have actually stood for in the last 5-6 years itself. I want the partners to actually say, this is the company that will take the goodness of VMware, because there was a lot of goodness of VMware, and this e-commerce platform that Amazon is, and this company will actually bring them together. Enterprise awareness, mundaneness, understanding migration, showing them a path to what cloud should really be, and around ease of use and consumption and credit card processing and e-commerce way of looking at things. Is there one company in this world that can actually bring it together? We are one of them. I don't know if there are others like us, but we are as much passionate and sort of careful about data loss and availability and reliability and mundaneness around replacing a hard drive and things like that, as about what does it mean to really bring the one-click goodness to everybody. And people hopefully are seeing some of this stuff. Like, I don't know if there is a way to show some of the Slack comments that we got recently, where one of our channel partners actually mentioned, and if you should read that, it says, I checked twice already, like I'm waiting for a new Android release. People are so enamored by the consumer grade nature of Nutanix that they're waiting with bated breath to see, can we get the new release soon? And on the right side, you'll see the same thing around how we have brought delight to something as mundane as upgrades. When people don't know what it means to really upgrade 20, 30, 40 nodes, can they go and sip a coffee and come back and it's all done?
Yeah, it's so great to see that. Yeah.
So I think that's where the real challenge and the real opportunity for this company really is. Not just in marketing, but in product, in support, in sales, in everything around this. How do you really bridge the gap between what VMware stood for and what Amazon stands for?
And
yeah, so there'll be a lot of air cover.
I was going to say,
around
we've
this,
seen
really.
the ad and
Yeah.
that. So what other kinds of things can partners look for?
Yeah, so obviously .next is coming again. So we're going bigger, bolder than we did last year. Last year our target was somewhere between 500 and 700 customers joining us, and we ended up with 962 and had to shut off registration. And many thanks to our channel partners for helping to bring customers and prospects to that event. We're going bigger this year, so our target is 2,500. And then, of course, we'll take that into other locations. We're going to attach .now to it and really integrate .now into .next. So the channel partner conference will be fully integrated with .next, both in the US in June, but also in EMEA in November too. So I think it's a great opportunity for our partners to hear exactly what our customers are hearing in the main stage presentations and really participate in the sessions. And then we'll be on tour. Again, that's a huge brand awareness campaign for us and a great lead pipe generation campaign as well. And then there's some very targeted programs that your team is running, Michelle, in terms of helping partners market as well. So I don't know if you want to talk about what we're doing there.
Absolutely, and just a quick piece on the roadshow. I think the target last year was 100 cities, and I think we did 130.
We did 130
cities, which is crazy. So, and from a marketing perspective, we're trying to make it as easy as one click as possible, and not one click at a marketing department necessarily, but all the way down to the individual salesperson that can easily take information and start to send out communications to their customers and then personally receive information back on their responses. So there's a lot of really great tools. I am going to do a shameless plug here. There is a webinar series that we have once a month. One session is for technical, one session is for sales in general, and one session is for marketing. And Joan Morales on the team runs those and does a great job. And it's great to hear the information and great to hear the feedback. There's a lot of really good feedback of those. So they're run by those specific people. So marketing runs marketing, and sales, we get a lot of sales and product people on there, and then technical one is run by a technical person as well. So
I'm also going to write a blog about why practitioners should actually come to .next. I think we are very passionate about simple things like obviously the enterprise apps of the last 10-15 years, but we're just as passionate about things like containers and all flash and things like that. So and of course how do you really build a career around knowing about the public cloud itself? Because there's going to be a meld of both, and all our practitioners should know how to become the subject matter expert in all things hybrid. So I'm going to write a blog, and hopefully in the next couple of days it's going to be live. So people should take that to their bosses and convince them that they should actually come.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it really is the only industry conference on the enterprise cloud. So it is a great opportunity for customers.
Yeah, and I think some of the highlights is obviously we are working the whole body. Again, we're not just nerds here, and we're not just people who are passionate about design. So there's a great, I would say, a very experienced person who actually built stuff at Apple and at Pinterest, Bob
Baxley.
Actually, who's actually going to be there. Bob Gates is going to talk about leadership and what does it really mean to cut through bureaucracy in organizations. So CIOs of large organizations would love to hear from him. Mark Leslie is going to talk about the arc of life, the highs and lows of what it means to go through innovation and disruption cycles and so on. It's like a TED Talk kind of a thing and so on. And there's a ton of really good CIOs out there.
Yeah, I'm really excited about our CIO roster joining us. So NASDAQ, for example, will have heads of infrastructure and VPs across a number of different companies. Kellogg's, for example, Tractor Supply Company, Amgen, Toyota. So it's a great opportunity for prospects to hear what their peers are doing, for customers to share information, and hearing from some of the thought leaders and innovators in the space.
Yeah. And in all these, I would say, logos and all these customers are actually showing up, we're probably as small as what Amazon is in terms of spend. But I think what they'll come and talk about is what do they covet about Amazon, and what do they covet about Nutanix, and how together they're actually going and helping transform their overall businesses. And one of them is coming from the rebellion from the developers, and the other one we are trying to create a rebellion from the IT operators, because they also need their cloud. And then we have to figure out how to actually drag and drop across the two worlds, which is this whole idea of app mobility that is going to be the vMotion of the next decade, I think. The world pays for mobility. vMotion was a $50 billion feature, right? I mean, cell phone portability, the number portability of cell phones is what made cell phones so popular, actually. I think our ability to go and drag and drop things between the developer world and the IT operator world is probably going to be what people will see a lot of innovation around at this .next and in the future as well.
That's great. Next topic, OEMs. And probably out of all of the questions other than IPO, this is one of the top ones that we got. And the number one questions are around OEM is, would you please comment, I'm going to read it, would you please comment on the Dell EMC merger? Do you see it impacting your business and the future go-to-sales and go-to-market strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I have a philosophical take on this because obviously nobody has seen the future. If only we'd have a crystal ball and we'd look at everything like that.
If only.
Yeah.
Be nice.
But like all things in life, all we can look at is the meta stuff, So at a meta level, I look at it from like, do the consumer companies care about co-opetition as much? In fact, they compete with themselves all the time. I mean, if you go to Amazon.com, not to the computing side, but the e-commerce side, when you search for something, it shows an item that they carry in their warehouse that they can fulfill from their warehouse. And there's like tons of other partners who actually carry the same item, which could be cheaper than Amazon. And Amazon might not even sell it, but they'll still make money off of it. Because at that level, Amazon is a platform. It's a recommendation engine which has made, and the partners have made it even more popular, as opposed to losing all that business to eBay and others, Walmart.com. They're like, let all of them come to my platform. And because they trust the recommendation part of it, they'll still buy from Amazon.com. Whether they're fulfilled by my warehouse is actually a second order thing, actually. Same thing with the App Store concept in Apple. At the end of the day, Apple makes apps, and they compete head-on with a lot of their app developers, like Apple Maps and Google Maps, Spotify and Apple Music, Keynote numbers, all this stuff, and Microsoft Office, PowerPoint, and all that stuff. The only way you can become a platform company is when you know how to healthily compete with your own partners. And that is what keeps you honest as well. I mean, I think at some level in the enterprise, we try to look at everything as a zero-sum game. Dell becomes a true platform company when it knows how to compete with itself. And if it becomes a true recommendation engine, where you can just go and say, tell me what different things that you actually have, and I'll figure out which one really works for me. And then they have to be the best to understand about different technologies, actually. Now, at the end of the day, what Dell does is going to be a question of the culture in Austin and the culture in Hopkinton, because it's really oil and water in some sense. Two different companies. Dell has always been about being a recommendation engine to its customers. Hopkinton has been about its own brand. It's like my brand, me, myself, everything about my brand and so on. And I think the two cultures will need a lot of work to come together. Not just from headquarters point of view, from the leadership point of view, but also from the point of view of knowing that at the end of it all, it's a $100+ billion market and we have to coexist. Dell sellers and EMC sellers have to know how to come together, because EMC sellers look at themselves as like they own the account. Well, the Dell sellers are like, what are you talking about? I've been selling servers and PCs in this business for a long time. People laughed at us or were cynical of our partnerships with CDW and with Dell and others. Like, they can't sell something this complex. It requires an EMC-like seller to go and do this. And at the end of it all, we said, look, computing is going to e-commerce and credit card processing where there's no people involved. What makes you think that CDW can't sell this stuff or Dell sellers can't sell this stuff? If it's that simple and you make the experience actually that good, you don't need a master's degree to understand SANs and fiber channel and Brocade and this and that. That whole complexity is gone. And as long as they know how to migrate stuff from something else, we can really have a lot of our CDW sellers go and sell this really well, without knowing all the details of Cisco and Brocade and EMC and things like that. So I think the onus is on us one more time to trust our Dell sellers to go and say they'll do a really good job of it going forward as well. And then let they be the grassroots strength that we need to keep Austin and Hopkinton actually honest about this.
Yeah, and we're seeing some great traction. I think, it's always interesting when there's this market FUD, but then the reality and the numbers are really speaking for themselves. And I know we probably can't go into a lot of numbers given where we are with our S1 and so forth, but just tremendous amount of new logos that have come in over the last quarter from Dell and Nutanix working together. Strong momentum on the vertical side. We were just at FRS. There's a 26-city roadshow that's about to start with Dell in EMEA, and I know Sammy in particular was just talking at our mid-year SCO, who heads up Central Europe, was just really raving about the partnership that he has with Dell. And similarly, what we're seeing on the Lenovo side, 1,000 certified sellers, in just a short time frame. Very strong traction from a marketing perspective. So I think that there's clearly strong demand out there. Customers see the benefits of both companies coming together, and it will be interesting to see how this plays out over the next year, but the business is really strong, and we're seeing that.
And I think people underestimate the power of the grassroots.
Yeah.
The grassroots Dell seller is actually going to keep everybody honest. And if we do right by them in the way we build our product and how honest our support is, because all they care for, if I were to understand it right, is delightful products that retires my quota fast and helps me get into acceleration. That is the core of all things selling, independent of what corporates and honchos sitting in headquarters are making some decisions on. Eventually, what matters is this an honest product, and does it have an honest support attached to it, so that I can keep selling more and more to the same accounts, and it's friction-free. Right.
And do I keep the trust of my customers?
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, that's what I really mean by saying it's friction-free.
Yeah.
Now, if Dell and Nutanix were to part ways sometime in the future, it's not because of Dell, not because of Austin or Hopkinton. It's because we at Nutanix didn't do our jobs well in really staying close to the ground, to the sellers who actually go and really move the needle. And if we are humbler and more honest than their EMC counterparts, they'll actually work with us closer than with worrying about VxRail and this and that. And look, if our products are only tad better than VxRail, then we deserve to be beaten, right? We deserve for Dell to drop us, right? We have to stay 2 to 3 years ahead of the competition. And only then can we actually say that we deserve the right to actually be resold and OEM by Dell itself. Otherwise, I think it's okay for us not to have that relationship, because Dell is like, look, I found a good enough alternative, and I own 28% of that company. Why should I not keep selling that stuff, actually? So it keeps us honest, and I feel that we can look within and say we are not doing a good enough job, as opposed to saying Dell pulled off something. If that makes sense.
So you brought up a couple different things there. A lot of questions around, are we looking at other OEMs, Cisco, HP, other folks? Do you care to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, for now we are focused on Dell and Lenovo. I mean, Lenovo is a big undertaking. I am extremely pleased with the decision we took like 6 months ago to walk away from another OEM and said we'll pick Lenovo over that other OEM. I think it would have been day and night difference in terms of the promptness, the hunger, the humility that Lenovo actually brings to the table. I mean, they have a clean slate.
Yeah,
they have
conflicts, right?
They have nothing to worry about, right? And they're saying, if it's that simple, I will go and disrupt every incumbent that's out there. Very similar to what Amazon is saying about incumbents. Like, you know what? I've made it so simple to go and consume computing that I don't have you go and really worry about EMC's last 20 years of innovation, or VMware's last 15 years of innovation. So Lenovo has a clean slate. They're actually doubling down on our hypervisor and the way, I mean, again, we don't sell a hypervisor, you know, in a separate line item, but there's a lot of goodness that Lenovo brings to the table that we are also learning a lot from. You know, like, what does it mean to get a sales force that knew really well how to sell servers, and have them not go through immense amount of training around the SAN and the old world, and instead say, look, all that stuff is abstracted out. It's invisible to you. Just figure out how to talk the application language, the SQL Server, the Oracle, the VDI, the Splunk, and so on. And they're pretty good at the application stuff, you know, you'd be surprised. So I think, you know, it's going to be a lot of good hard work in the coming 12, 18 months to really figure out how to do these two well. And then probably we'll have to go and do some regional OEMs at the very least, you know, where, you know, for Japan or Germany and things like that. You know, future stuff, we would rather not overpromise and underdeliver. I think we should just, you know, make sure that we've done a pretty good job with these two. Look, we walked away from Cisco because we said we need to keep our Dell relationship really well, right? I mean, all the rumors of, oh, Cisco wants to acquire. Yeah, Cisco wanted to actually partner with a company that they could go and acquire, and we said no way. I mean, at the end of the day, we have all this good relationship with the existing, you know, partner, and we stand by our current relationships, you know, in a big way. So once we do a good job of Dell and Lenovo, then if we think that the market has become big enough, I think we'll go and do another OEM. It's very early days to actually speculate on a third one yet.
Along the lines, again, to your point, back to the feet on the street, we've seen an incredible swell of interest from Lenovo. You mentioned earlier, Julie, about the certifications.
Yeah.
We have a brand new sales academy that we launched in November, and we've had an amazing outpour from the Lenovo teams. And so we've got over 2,000 certifications to date. And you know, a good portion of those are Lenovo. So great response. And again, I'll do a shameless plug here for the Academy, but the Academy, we absolutely changed up the way that we're teaching. Our folks were leveraging our own internal content for our partners from a sales perspective, and it's delivered by our salespeople. So it's from a salesperson to a salesperson. So if you're in the audience out there and you're in sales and you haven't checked it out, please check out the Academy. But back to Lenovo, they've done a fantastic job of just absolutely adopting that. I'm going to keep moving here from, you brought up competitive a little bit. There was a lot of questions on VxRail, vSAN, and the potential Cisco announcements and comments and everything else. What do you think are the top two competitors and why? And not so much maybe why as more as what are you going to do or what are we going to do to keep out in front of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, you know, people ask me, what makes you think you won't be another BlackBerry, right? You know, yeah, they were first in the market, and they really understood the pulse of bringing email to the palm, right? And they had a few apps running. You know, it's not like you couldn't play a game or you couldn't browse the web in a BlackBerry. And what makes you think that you can actually be like another long-lasting, iconic company? In this space? I mean, there's no guarantees here. You know, at the end of the day, when we are getting commoditized, it's really a signal from the market that this market is big. Look, if the incumbents don't jump on a certain market or new architecture, it actually means it's a small market.
Yeah.
It's validation,
right?
Absolutely validation to the market.
And more than that, it's like, you know, without they educating the market, the 3-tier is actually going to last here a little bit longer than we wanted it to. We want the 3-tier to obliterate. We want the V-blocks to vanish. We want the flex pods to vanish, right? And that'll create a lot of dollars to be displaced here, right? I mean, Android and iOS fought with each other, but they sucked the wind out of the PC. Right? I mean, that's the way you look at it. So what's the PC analogy in this world? It's the 3-tier. It's the SAN, it's the Brocade, it's SAN and all that stuff that really adds up, right? So we have to figure out what it means to go and keep pushing the envelope in the market itself. It's what virtualization was like 10 years ago. And VMware as a leader in this category, went on and just kept getting, pushing the envelope on what virtualization could do. Now there's a lot of companies that said we are also like that, like Zen Server said, oh, we are like VMware, and the analysts in Wall Street thought that it was like that, and it was not to be, because the attention to detail was missing that VMware had on technology and using and ease of use and applications and things like that. So there's a lot of new players, and I think that means good for this market. It's healthy for this market. There'll be less friction in the marketplace because everybody's going and talking the same language. And we would rather commoditize ourselves than actually be a niche in a space which is only $1 billion TAM.
Yeah, like we were talking, I think it was yesterday, about Apple and how they weren't afraid to cannibalize some of their own lines of business, right, to keep innovating and stay ahead, right? So would you rather take it from yourself or have one of your competitors take it away from you?
I mean, like, look, in some sense, we compete with ourselves. Like Dell and Lenovo compete with us because we have an NX model as well. And we could have looked at just like, oh, this is a zero-sum game, the glass is half empty, why would you want to give this business to Dell and Lenovo? We said if we don't cannibalize ourselves and compete with ourselves, someone else will.
Yeah.
Like, look, an iPhone competed with an iPod, right? I mean, an iPad mini competed with the iPhone, and now an iPhone 6 Plus competes with an iPad mini, right? So there's a lot of stuff that that you need to keep doing every 2-3 years, which goes and says, look, that's commodity now. Let's move on to the next thing, right? And you cannibalize yourself, you compete with yourself. And that's what we need to keep doing to not be a BlackBerry, actually.
Well, I think back to your analogy or your comments around Amazon, though, is they have found ways to make money and do business off of the competition with themselves. And so I think it's the same, again, applies absolutely right here as well. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that a book company could now be a challenger in the space of computing just goes on to say two things about that company: ambition and attention to detail. They have done a pretty good job of attention to detail that most of the incumbents are like flying high. They're like, oh, my Wall Street stock, this, that, whatever. When Jeff is like, who cares about Wall Street stock? It'll happen. And if we do a good job with Main Street and our customers, Wall Street will take care of itself.
That connection to the customer, understanding any pieces of the customer and what they want, how they want to consume, and everything else. I'm going to move on to roadmap and products. A lot of questions there. We just launched 4.6, which you talked about earlier. I know there's probably not a ton that we can share on roadmap, but is there a couple comments that you want to talk about for 4.6 or where we are with the product?
I mean, look, at a very high level, obviously AHV needs to be more invisible. Our hypervisor needs to be more invisible. And we're working really hard to figure out what that means. Learning a lot from AWS and Zen and what they did with APIs and service first and so on. We need to do a lot of that stuff where you don't have to be an expert in AHV to really go and sell the notion of an enterprise cloud, right? So there's a lot of innovation there happening in networking, security, things like that within AHV itself. There's a lot of work that we're doing with app mobility. Drag and drop, I call it the vMotion of the next decade. And it's not easy. This is a 5-year journey. Like, what does it mean to really drag and drop from physical to virtual, physical to cloud, virtual to cloud, VMware to AHV, AHV back to VMware. And I mean, we have to build technologies that make it easy for people to move out of Nutanix into something else as well, not just into Nutanix, actually, because that's what keeps us honest, actually. So there's a lot of work going on in app mobility. We are thinking service first, API first, credit card first. What does it mean to actually think of a self-service portal, for example, where it's not like the, junk that we've seen from B2B companies in the last 15 years and what self-service means. Not even like the junk of OpenStack, but think like an e-commerce company. How would they do self-service differently and so on? So a lot of work going on in that space of think like an e-commerce company than anything else, But yeah, I think obviously the innovation of the last 5 years needs to go on to new form factors, new use cases, new applications, new workloads, and so on. There'll be some good surprising announcements coming in at .next. So love for people to be there and see really you could do this with that software as well and kind of stuff. Because that's about going and mining our own exhaust, right? Like, how do you take this piece of software and say, really, you can use it for that, and you can use it for that as well, and so on.
I don't know if you want to make any comments or.
No, that's great.
There were a lot of questions around 3-node minimums and price points for SMB, and a lot of challenges that our partners are facing around that.
And strategy for the SMB.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep saying this, that VMware became VMware because it was also in the SMB, right? 600,000 customers. Amazon is going to become Amazon because it has 1 million customers. You can't be a platform company without also catering well to the SMB. So that's an important realization we have. Right now we have, a little over 2,000 plus customers and so on. If you need to get to 10,000, 20,000, and with the help of the OEMs, we need to go and achieve this actually. So a lot of good thought going on in this space of pricing, packaging. All I'll say is that I think the competition underestimates us on our ability to package and price for the SMB. And they haven't seen it all. So a lot of good stuff that
foreshadowing.
and we have to commoditize ourselves, because that means the market becomes bigger. The friction at the base of the pyramid in the SMB world needs to be zero touch. How can you do it zero touch and so on? We're not there yet. We still are considered to be a premium product, which is not bad, because we invest in R&D. We are looking at how we need to go and really rethink the idea of an enterprise cloud. But if we can take this premium brand and make it delightful for the SMBs and the lower and the mid market, I think it makes for a bigger, better company than just being a niche play in the enterprise itself.
Well, an SMB grows up, right?
Yeah,
so if
absolutely.
you get the technology in there when they're smaller and they're used to it, then they grow up.
It's the growth engine. Look, the way I look at it is that if you want to be a company that's delivering $1 billion, $2 billion of revenue, then the machine has to hum, and the machinery is all SMB and mid-market and the channel. If that thing is not humming, then you will be unpredictable in terms of the business. And then the enterprise, the Global 2000, you can go and crush your numbers, but you can't make your numbers from the enterprise. The predictability of the business machinery is about the lower half of the pyramid. And the fact that you are ubiquitous, you're everywhere, and it just quietly hums.
I think the great news, where we have a bit of a head start, which is exciting, is around all of the one-click ease of use, which is so important to SMBs. So then it becomes a pricing, packaging exercise, primarily if you've solved some of those complexity pain points that tend to be problematic for companies that start large enterprise with command line interfaces, and they're not thinking through some of those simplistic things that need to happen when you've got a very small IT staff.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's not going to be an easy problem. Many companies try to go down market and they fail miserably. I think it's not just about technology and product, it's also about support, it's also about the sales motion, it's about incentives, about can we create a win-win with the OEMs and the channel and things like that. So there's a lot that we need to think about DMRs like SHI and CDW and so on. There's a lot that we need to do, which is architectural, requires a lot of business design and organizational design, not just product design itself. So I'm not saying that we'll actually crush it. All I can say is that we understand the complexity of the problem, and we know that we have to get there, because without being in the base of the pyramid, in the middle of the pyramid, we can't be a platform company.
We have a couple more minutes, so I want to give you guys an opportunity to provide any final thoughts for the audience out there.
For me, Sunil, who's our Chief Product Officer, Development Officer, he closed a lot of the sales kickoffs, the mid-year sales kickoffs that we had like in the last 3 weeks with something that was very powerful and yet very it has levity built in, like some amount of frivolousness. He basically said, look, we have a great thing going here to our own internal employees, the salespeople and the marketing folks and so on, and the BD and alliance guys. We have a great thing going, don't fuck it up. And to me, I say this to myself, like, we have a good thing going, in this company, and with the channel, with a lot of stuff that we do with our channel partners and so on, we've tried to make it a win-win. And to myself, I say, don't fuck it up. You know, and this is actually, it comes with the burden of responsibility, you know, and to keep the ears on the ground, to understand the pulse of the market, to endear ourselves to the Dell sellers, the Lenovo sellers, the CDW sellers, the small partners like B Arena in Australia, to VIFX, I mean, there's a ton of small partners done some great things with us, actually, you know. I mean, Japan is lighting up like there's no tomorrow. You know, Germany is looking up. So there's a lot of small little partners who are doing great stuff for us. So we need to keep our pulse to, you know, understand the pulse of the market, you know, keep our ears to the ground, and not fuck it up.
That's so hard to top. I don't even know how I'm going to go there. But I would just say, you know, I would implore the partners to help us with that charter, right? It's so important for us to be listening and to be hearing what we could be doing better to support them, to support their customers. So help us with that ambitious charter would be the way that I sum it up. And please make sure that you understand the enterprise cloud message, because that really is a message we want to be propagating in the market.
That's
and it's
resonating really, really well.
Take us into our next act.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both very much for being here. Thank you for your candor and as always, just the openness and transparency that is definitely part of the culture of the company. Thank you very much to everybody who has joined us out there. Again, this has been recorded, so if you want to share it or go back and look at something else, feel free to do so. And until next time, as always, thank you for everything you do to support the company, and we will talk to you soon. So thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank
Thanks.
you.